This week on Personally Speaking, our guest is the wonderful actor Billy Gray. Please stay with us. Hello and welcome to Personally Speaking. I'm your host, Msgr Jim Lisante, and Billy Gray joins me now. Billy's film and television career spans over 40 years. He starred as Bud in the television series Father Knows Best, earning him an Emmy nomination, and he acted in more than 200 movies opposite stars, including Humprey Bogart, Bob Hope, Patricia, Neal, and Barbara Stanwyck. From 1970 to 1995, Billy was a Class A motorcycle speedway racer and race promoter. He then turned to inventing and entrepreneurship. Billy's here with us today to talk about his life, his career, his family, and the values that matter the most to him. Joining me now, I'm so pleased to welcome to Personally Speaking, Billy Gray. All right. Thank you, Billy Gray, for coming on our program.
Oh, it's good to be here.
You know, Billy, I realized I was working for an organization called the Christophers, and we came out to Los Angeles 18 years ago to do shows, and you and I did a television interview. So it's good to get together with you every 18 years, whether we need to or not. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Now, Billy, let me begin with a question. A lot of folks know, obviously, about your acting career, but not as many people know, and I was kind of surprised by the depth of your motorcycle speedway racing career. But here's my question. When you get on that motorcycle, how do you work to overcome fear of death, fear of disability? When you get on that machine and know that you're vulnerable, what do you do to put away the fear?
Well, my sister, when I was like 5 years old or so, took me up to Yosemite and taught me how to ski, snow ski.
Wow!
And I was one of these kind of kids that just had no fear at all. And I fell down every time I took off. I fell down, and so I learned how to fall down. I became very, very good at falling down, actually. And as a matter of fact, I turned it into a little kind of an event. After I tumble around, I'd try and end up on my feet and go ta-da, as if it were my intention to fall down. So I kind of have a nice relationship with failure. And so when I'm on the motorcycle, I kind of have the same approach. I fell down a lot. I was the king of falling down because I always tried to go faster than my ability, and it usually ended up falling down. And I tried to make a thing out of that too, with sliding around and coming up and going to duh. So I really didn't have any fear of falling down.
A fearless Billy Gray, a fearless Billy. Billy, did you, all these years you were doing this motorcycle racing, did you sustain like serious injury?
I did. I separated a collarbone one time, and that was thousands of bruises and bumps and scratches and scrapes, but nothing really serious. I went out of my way to protect myself, though. I got started in the racing of the motorcycles when I was like 30, I think, and I was racing against kids, basically 18, and I, knowing that I was over my head most of the time, I went out of my way to protect myself. I invented a lot of things around protecting myself. I wore football guards on my thighs, and hockey. In hockey, they have a kind of a girdle that goes underneath their uniform, and I modified that girdle so that my hip pointers were covered in plastic, and my tailbone was covered in plastic, and I made an overlapping sheath of plastic like scales for my backbone all the way down from my neck to my coccyx.
Wow.
And then there's other things. I put tubes around my thighs in a plastic tube, and well, it was a bunch of, for a while, I even had hockey gloves on. And I don't know if you know hockey gloves, but they're really big and protected. I didn't stick with that because they were too cumbersome. But I went out, and suffice it to say, I made sure I didn't get hurt when I fell down.
You know, I mentioned in the introduction, of course, that aside from the racing and the acting, that Billy is also a very successful inventor. And as I'm listening to you talk about what you invented to give yourself protection, that was a great thing that you had the skill to put that all together. You know, Billy, one of the things, I went to a Catholic school where there were as many as 50 kids in a class. And while that sounds crazy now, one of the good things about it is you sure learned how to socialize or be in socialization with other kids. When you're being tutored by someone like you were, and then you're on a set all day with mostly adults, um, how did you learn to relate comfortably with your peers?
Well, yeah, that was somewhat of an issue. I I I I got started acting at 5,
Mm-hmm.
so I was always around in my work environment was always around adults. So and the fact that they treated me as a professional actor, and I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that. Uh, what's the word I'm after? Acknowledgement
Mm-hmm.
of personhood. So I always felt good about myself. Oh yeah, well, I think what helped everything was that my mom, she was an actress,
Mm-hmm.
and she had a very unsuccessful marriage, and her husband was uh, berated by his mother to the point where he didn't feel very good about himself. And so
Ah.
she went out of her way to make sure that I felt good about myself.
Mm-hmm.
So brainwashed me basically is what happened. Uh, from early on, before I was really aware of it, she told me about it later. She would have this mantra that she would say to me, "You're Billy Gray. You can do anything." And
Wow.
she would say it over and over and over, and I bought into it. I just
Yeah.
I think I can do anything. I mean, I'm a little more realistic now. I mean, basketball's not my long,
Right, right.
but overall, I have the approach that I can do it,
Yeah,
whatever it
yeah.
is, and so I don't fear trying to do things, and from my early skiing experience, I don't mind failing at it either.
And falling
So
down. Yeah.
everybody knows it. I mean, it's kind of a cliche. Failing is really an opportunity to learn, and
Yeah.
that's really true. I took that to heart.
One of the things that you kind of went around the rules on back then in the 50s and 60s was on getting high. And as we now know, in 1962, a policeman stops you and it causes you all sorts of problems. Billy could have faced as much as 10 years in jail for being convicted in that. He goes nolo contendere and they make an arrangement. He's 45 days in jail. I mention that, Billy, because I walk down the streets of Manhattan now and I don't smoke. But just walking down the streets, I can get high because everyone else smokes. Did you know back in 1962 how kind of out of proportion it was that people could have their careers ruined and be sent to jail for something as simple as smoking?
Yeah, I was aware that the law was wrong
Mm-hmm.
early on, and a friend of mine, another kid actor actually, Bobby Driscoll, he uh, he introduced me, or a friend of his. I'm not sure now. Come to think of it, but anyway, it was early. It was like 15 or so, and I started smoking then, and I never felt like I was doing anything particularly wrong.
Yeah.
Uh, so I just felt, well, I'm right, and it, the world is wrong, and I didn't have a problem with that at all.
Well, related to that, and I guess a lot of parents and grandparents watching a program like this will be either surprised or not so surprised by what you're saying. But like I have a lot of young friends in my parish who say they smoke every day, and I know the parents and grandparents have a problem with that. Do you have any idea why, when you started smoking at 15, you did need to be smoking? Like, it's one thing if we make the choice to do it, it's another if it's a dependency. Was it a dependency for you?
I don't think it was a dependency in the clinical sense,
Okay.
but it's something that feels good,
Mm-hmm.
and and it does open your mind. I mean, it lets you see from various perspectives that you wouldn't ordinarily be have available to you,
Mm-hmm.
and that's broadening. And I felt it was a positive on balance, but I can see how it could become a dependency in that it just feels good, and you
Mm.
want to, it feels good. It wasn't. It was never a physical dependency what I suppose a heroin addiction is probably like.
Right.
I mean, you have a physical necessity in your on your hands, and
Mm-hmm.
I never felt that about it. But if it was around, it was more pleasant to take a poke every once in a while than not. And but I never felt like I was under its control or
Mm.
anything, or like it had a hold of me. But it was just something that was enjoyable to do.
Billy Gray is
But
our guest,
I,
and
I don't think
go ahead.
I'd like to go on record as saying it. Like it can be abused. There's no
Yeah.
question about it. You can go overboard with a good thing,
Yeah.
and I'm sure people do.
Thank you for that, Billy. I know a lot of parents out there will say,
I
it's
can't
good to hear.
philosophize about everybody should smoke. I'm not. That's not my position.
Right.
But don't feel bad about yourself if you do.
Billy Gray has talked before a number of times. I've heard him interviews praise the acting skills of his mom, and she was certainly a great actress. But Billy, let's go back to their parenting, raising skills. When you look back to your mom and dad, can you name for us what they did in raising you that they did right?
Well, I think in retrospect, I'm glad my mom brainwashed me because I think people have a tendency to be timid and just kind of naturally because if you do something that's unusual, you don't know what the result's going to be all the time, and sometimes it's not a positive result. So
Yeah.
people restrict themselves more than they really should.
One of the reasons I reached out to you 18 years ago was because Jane Wyatt told me to. Now, Jane Wyatt, for those of our listeners and watchers who don't know, great actress, going back to movies like Lost Horizon, and of course, she played Billy's mother on Father Knows Best, but very devout Catholic who loved Billy Gray. And I found this quote, Billy, about your relationship with her, which I love, where you said, I remember one time we went head to head because she was Catholic and I told her I was a devout atheist. So we went back and forth on that. She kept insisting that I was really agnostic, and that's how we settled things. We agreed to disagree, but she really was my dear friend, and I was pallbearer at her funeral. She was a wonderful lady, and I loved her. And Bill, I got to tell you, what she said to me back then was how much she loved and admired you. So you had this special bond with this Catholic lady. But here's what I want to ask you, whether you call yourself agnostic or atheist. We had Ed Asner, the wonderful guest on the show, and in Wikipedia, he identifies as a Jewish atheist. So he was about 90 when he came on our show, and I said, let me ask you something, Ed. As you're 90 and heading toward the last roundup, are you still an atheist? And he said, I'll say it this way, Monsignor Jim. He said, as I get closer to the end, I sure hope you people are right. And in the same way, like, do you hope in any way, shape, or form that there is a life to come?
Well, I have given that some thought. At 84, those thoughts do enter your mind.
Sure.
But what I've arrived at as far as philosophy is concerned is that the golden rule is really all that's required.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, I think there's one quote that I think from the Jewish end of that is that everything else is commentary or something to that effect. But
Right.
I find that if you let the golden rule guide your actions,
Mm.
it all works out just wonderfully well. And in fact, if my ship ever comes in and I'm become a billionaire,
Right.
which is very unlikely, but if it does, the first thing I would do is set up a foundation to see that the golden rule is taught in school from early on, from like the first grade.
Yeah.
Let people know that they're going to feel good about themselves if they don't take advantage of other people. Because it's
Yeah.
pretty easy to take advantage of people if you've got a fairly decent mind. There's a lot of differentiation between intelligence on there is a scale of some people are a little slower than others, and it's
Yeah.
pretty easy if you're one of the speedy ones to take advantage of someone,
Yeah.
and it's too easy actually, and people get sucked into it and become people who aren't proud of themselves. And I
Yeah.
think being proud of yourself is probably the best thing that can happen to you. And if you just follow the golden rule, everything works out. As far as afterlife, I kind of have my feeling on that is that there's a universal intelligence of some kind. I'll go that far, and that at death you become connected to that. So
Mm.
I see it as an ending. I see it more as a continuation of the life experience in a different form.
Okay. You know, Billy, if I go before you, I'm going to come back and haunt you to show you that it's real. Let me ask you too. People may remember this. You worked closely. He was your TV dad with Robert Young. Since then, a lot of stuff has come out about how he struggled with depression. A wonderful man, apparently, and a great co-worker for you. But did you know back then much about depression? And did you know he was a man who grappled with it?
I never I did find out later that he had issues with alcoholism,
Mm.
and I think that is just a result or a symptom of depression.
Yeah.
And but I never realized anything like that while we were working. He was a consummate professional,
Yeah.
and a sweet man. I never heard him be angry at anybody. I'm sure he
Wow.
got angry from time to time, but he never expressed any anger towards anybody on the set.
Hmm.
And he was a model, a model person, as far as I could tell at the time.
Yeah.
There was one thing that I never could quite figure out, but frequently we would be in a scene together, and he would have me by the arms. So he'd be holding me,
Ah.
and his grip was always a little tighter. That didn't hurt or anything, but it was always
Right.
tighter than it needed to be, and I always wondered about that. And but Jane actually told me later on that he did fall off the wagon on occasion,
Mm.
and I'm thinking maybe he was just holding on to me so tight so he didn't weave around. But no, he was a splendid person, and but he was a private person, and I
Ah.
respected him for not presuming to be to give me any fatherly advice. He never really got into me as a person and
Hmm.
said, Billy, you're showing up late too often, and you ought to get your act together or something. He never did that. He never tried to be fatherly to me, and
Right.
I gotta say thank you, Bob, for that. And
Wow.
yeah, I don't know if I told you this about the show, but it's something when I have the opportunity, I like to bring this to the attention of people.
Hmm.
The original Father Knows Best was a radio show, and it had a question mark at the end. And when
Ah.
he decided to take it to television, the only sponsor was Kent Cigarettes that had a time slot available. And for Kent Cigarettes, uh, the question mark was a deal breaker. He
Mm.
told me it was a deal breaker, and we didn't go into why. It's just that it was, and so the show got turned. The show's concept got turned on its head.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
the declarative statement, "Father knows best," which I never bought into that. I mean,
Yeah.
but people do, and people did, and I think he regretted that over the years. But it was the only way he could get the show on television, so
That's
he had to
interesting.
drop the question mark. But I always felt that question mark being on there was tantamount to saying, "To thy own self be true,"
Mm.
and
I like that.
if you do that, you can't be false to any man. and that's a wonderful message, you know.
Yeah.
But it kind of got lost in the shuffle of commercialism.
Billy Gray is our guest. Billy, let me ask you, this past weekend in church, the gospel was Jesus being asked by the apostles, hey, teach us how to pray. And of course, he teaches them the Our Father. But for me, one of the toughest lines in that prayer has always been, forgive us, Lord God, as we ourselves forgive those who do wrong to us. I mention that because when I read your biography, and I hear that 1962, you'd done all these TV and movies, and a lot of people have worked with you, but your career in the acting community effectively ends. Your agent says, can't get you any work. People you worked with before don't work with you. I read that story, and I thought to myself, I'd be pretty ticked off at people who I worked with and frankly made a career off me, who then when I was, down, didn't help to pick me up. How well or how poorly does Billy Gray forgive people who let him down, disappointed him, broken his heart? What kind of forgiver are you, Billy?
Well, actually, it really wasn't as dramatic or as traumatic as you might think it was.
Really?
Because
Okay.
at the end of the Father Knows Best show, I was pretty tired of playing that character. It was 6 years, 200 episodes,
Wow.
and Bud was, and I was actually older than Bud was. I was like 22 at the end of the show, and I was playing something like 18,
Mm-hmm.
and I the fact that I was persona non grata in Hollywood because I was a dope fiend, apparently, according to the Inquirer. That didn't really affect me because I always had a pretty good feeling about myself,
Mm-hmm.
and the fact that I didn't want to do the Bud character anymore, and those were the offers that I was getting was more of Bud, and so it wasn't so traumatic that I couldn't get work,
Yeah.
and on top of that, a few years later, I discovered Speedway, and that took care of my performance
Mm.
Jones,
Right.
because it is a performance. You're out there, in front of an audience, and you're trying to do the best you can,
Yeah.
and so that kind of took care of my need to be a performer because I am a show off. I basically it's a show off, and I succumb to it. So
And you admit
but
it freely. Good for you.
I, I didn't have any hard feelings about the industry. I
Mm.
knew that if you're seen as a dope fiend, you're not going to get work. So it didn't speak to me personally. Is what I guess the bottom line.
Okay. Billy Gray's our guest. Billy, my dad went home to God when he was 84, now that you're 84. My mom is 101, God willing, soon to be 102, so who knows how long any of us have. But does aging, especially a guy who's as dynamically alive as you have been in many ways, inventing and racing and acting, does aging cause you any fear?
Does what caused me fear?
Aging.
Aging.
Yeah.
Yes. I've lost. Well, I had some medical issues. I lost both my tits for some reason or other. I felt a little pin like what's a pea-sized lump in my tit, and had it taken out,
Wow.
and did a biopsy on it. Turned out it was cancer, and so I had the breast removed, and then a month or two later, I felt another little thing, and so I had that breast removed, and then a year or two later, I had a heart attack, and so I had a quadruple bypass, and
Wow.
so those issues. I kind of my recovery time. I wasn't as active as I should have been in getting my muscle tone back, and so
Mm.
I'm not strong enough to race motorcycles anymore.
Yeah.
I would if I were strong enough. I'd be racing motorcycles right now, at 84 or no.
All right. Final question, Billy Gray, for you. Years ago, I think maybe the first interview I ever did was with the film director Frank Capra, and in his movie "It's a Wonderful Life," as well as in his personal philosophy, he would say physical illness is not most people's problem, but that the greatest scourge of humanity is discouragement, giving way to discouragement. With all the ups and downs of life, is Billy Gray still a person of hope?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. In fact, I even have hope for the 70 odd million people that voted for Trump. I think I think they can see eventually they will see the error of their ways.
All right. So you're a hope-filled man. And Billy, I just thank you so much for coming on the program many, many years after our first interview. I kind of like, in some ways, the effect that your mom's advice to you had of believing in yourself and having confidence in yourself. I also don't disagree with you at all that it's a better way to teach faith and religion, to have a loving relationship with God than one based on fear. And I think a mistake of the past sometimes is that we taught completely from a position of fear. So I think in so many ways, while you and I might have one point of view or another that goes in different directions, I think you and me and Jane Wyatt have much more in common. And you're right. If every kid in the world could begin by being taught the golden rule and trying to live by it, we'd have a much better world. Billy, I'm praying for your continued good health, and I'm praying that there is a life to come, and I'm praying that I see you there, okay?
I'll see you there.
Thank you, Billy. Thank you for being with us on our program. If you want to reach me for any reason, I'm at personallyspeakingpodcast@gmail.com. You can also get past episodes of Personally Speaking, or even current ones, by going to YouTube and searching under Personally Speaking with Msgr Jim Lisante. Please, if you would, hit like and subscribe. I'd also like to remind you that Personally Speaking is on Facebook at Personally Speaking with Msgr Jim Lisante. We're also now on Instagram at Personally Speaking Podcast. Please share and let others know about Personally Speaking. I'm privileged to serve as host and executive producer of Personally Speaking. Our producer is Lisa Jantovitz. Thanks so much for being with us. We'll see you next time, again, on Personally Speaking.